Hello everybody, it's the TMG channel, you're speaking with AJ, and this is a special shout out video to the guys over at Nerdarchy. How's it going, guys? Thanks for the mention the other day, and particularly Dave, who requested these fantastic creatures. Today we're going to be covering the Treant. Now, the origin of the Treant goes all the way back to the original white box set of Dungeons and Dragons, where they were known as Ents, because they are based on Tolkien's Ents. The word Treant refers to tree and giant, so Treant is the correct pronunciation of their name. Now, what are they? Where do they come from? What's the lore, and how do you use them in your game? This is why I'm here. So, we go to the deep, most vibrant and vital parts of the forest, ancient forests, where sleeping trees soak up the sunshine, their roots buried deep in the fertile soil as they feed upon the lifeblood of the sky and the earth below. And their breathing in and out day to day becomes the thrum of the thriving ecosystem all around them. They are the giants of the forest. And in a magical environment such as Dungeons and Dragons worlds, these trees occasionally wake up. They become sentient. And you can have it in your game that the elves sing them into being and wake them up as it's kind of conjectured in Lord of the Rings that the elves kind of woke the Ents up. Or wizards did it as an experiment, or gods created them during the Dawn War as a workforce or some sort of guardians of their realms that protect them from forms of corruption. And the Ents, in many ways, are the guardians and protectors of the forests, and they have been since the world began. So the trees that are destined to become treants meditate through long cycles of seasons, and they gradually develop to facial features. They become more humanoid in appearance, grow branches downwards to be arms, and their trunk forms into legs. And they grow these limbs, and then at some point they wake up and step free of the ground and will take their roots out of the earth and bundle them up and become walking sentient beings that can move around. Now, most of the time they basically just sit and are happy in their role as trees, plant themselves in the soil, listen to everything going on through the forest, and by this they actually tune into the life force of the forest itself. So if there's a disturbance miles away, they will feel it through the disturbance through the root systems of all the other trees around them. And they have copious amounts of little animal friends, and they learn how to instill their secret of intelligence to other creatures, if only for a limited time. And they are actually able to wake up other trees for a short period of time to become mobile and assist them under their general guidance and direction. So when they do wake up a tree, this is one of their abilities, the ability to animate a tree once a day. They can magically animate one or two trees that it can see within 60 feet of it. And the trees have the same statistics as the treant, except they have basically no intelligence or charisma. Well, they've got a score of 1, so negligible. And they can't speak. And all they can basically do is slam things or assist the treant by lifting and carrying or moving or blocking, getting in the way of, or possibly using the help or assist action to give the treant advantage in its combat. And a treant would definitely use this if it's being outnumbered by foes, which would be quite often. It would be a very rare thing to see treants together working as a group because they are such rare creatures. Only a few of them would exist every few hundred years, and it takes a long time for a treant to form. And while they are forming, the other treants will uplift them from the soil, take the entire soil bed with them, take them to a sacred grove, well secluded, and care for them until which time they wake up. And these places are very sacred to the treants and elves and all other good creatures, particularly fey creatures. So They can exist in all sorts of different environments, and you can adapt the Treant to reflect whatever environment they come from. There is no reason why you couldn't have treants from quite alien environments where there's nothing but vines, or aquatic treants which are created out of kelp or coral, although technically coral is many, many small animals. Um, it could be sponges or something like that. Actually, that's an animal too. Who knows? Something aquatic. Seaweed. And there's no reason why you couldn't have them form out of algae and things like that as well, and take on quite a different form. Or an alien environment where they form out of fungus or something like that. Although you do have the myconids and the myconid sovereign, who in many ways is a lot like an ant. So their stats are, they are huge. They are tree-sized. So at their smallest, they're probably the size of a fairly good-sized sapling of, say, a oak tree or something like that. And at their largest, they're as big as the biggest trees there are, which would be redwoods, which are enormous. And they can live for a very long time. They can live for thousands of years. And because of their magical sort of nature of them, they could well be immortal until destroyed. So they could live potentially for tens of thousands of years and have seen things like the rise and fall of kingdoms. So they could be good sources of information if you get on their good side, because they'll know where ruins are located within forests that have been completely grown over, and they could call the trees to move aside and get out of the way so that you can get access to dungeons and crypts and things that have actually been completely grown over by verdant forest. So yeah, and they could also hide things for you. In one of my games, the elves use trees to cover up evil portals and things like that. And they hide items of great power inside trees. So the treants could certainly do that. They could have trees twist and grow around things which they want to keep safe and secure and hidden. They have an armor class of 16, which is natural armor, although you could easily have it so that particularly treants which come into conflict regularly might well embed stones and things like that in their bark. I mean, it's just basically like our skin as their bark, and they could embed the stones in there to give themselves an additional protection. So I'd bump that up to, say, 17 at the most. And their hit points are 138, but of course huge treants could have almost double that number. And they have a speed of 30 feet, great giant strides of tree-sized legs. Although they may look quite squat and unwieldy, they can actually move quite quickly. And their limbs are made out of wood, but they're subtle and can move like as springy as a sapling and as strong as oak. They have a strength of 23. They've got a dexterity of 8, constitution of 21, intelligence of 12, wisdom of 16, and a charisma of 12. They are wise, intelligent, very, very strong, not very agile. They have damage resistance to bludgeoning and piercing because they are essentially made out of wood, although, of course, slashing attacks do full damage, axes, that sort of thing. They have a vulnerability to fire, and they protect their woodland home against creatures which despoil, poison, set fires, or cut into young trees or healthy trees without any regard to preserving the forest. So anything that despoils the forest is on the bad side of an ent, a treant. They have a false appearance, so they can appear like a normal tree when they're basically motionless. So they can dig their roots in and imitate a tree quite flawlessly. They might look a somewhat weird tree. If you really know what you're looking for, you might think, that looks like a particularly person-sized shaped tree. And they are siege monsters, so they can deal double damage to any object or structure, such as a wall, building, a vehicle, ship, anything like that. And they use a multi-attack of 2 slam attacks, which are plus 10 to hit, and they only have a reach of 5 feet, but I'd say with a truly gargantuan treant, I would extend that out to 10. and one target is hit for 16 bludgeoning damage. I would increase that to maybe 20 for the truly giant Ents, and of course that siege damage would mean that a truly giant Ent would be doing potentially 40 points of damage per round to a wall or something like that, which would be devastating. They can also throw rocks as per giants, plus 10 to hit with a range of 60/180 feet, and they do 28 points of bludgeoning damage with that. And of course, if they animate a couple of trees, then the trees will be doing exactly the same damage per round. So they could quickly lay the beats down on pretty much anything. So a treant would definitely be an environment where it could call upon trees to help it if it needed it. You would very rarely find them completely away from any other trees. That's just not to their advantage, and they would feel uncomfortable, I'm sure, being completely cut off from a forest, because they use it as an extension of their senses. They have a passive perception of 13, and they can speak a surprising array of languages: Common, Druidic, Elvish, and Sylvan. Now, Druidic is, yeah, that's another key point too. Druids would have a close association with the Treants and regard them with great reverence. And each Treant would have a personality very much its own. They pretty much bootstrap them up themselves into intelligence, and there's no real telling what shape that intelligence is going to have. They could be pranksters, they could be very serene and slow and sedate. They could be quite aggressive towards living things because they see them as nothing but despoilers, and it would take a lot to convince them that you're not a bad guy. Kind of similar to Treebeard not seeing the difference between a hobbit and an orc. And the magical energies that animate a tree could quite easily combine to the detriment of every living thing to create a corrupted treant, which would have essentially exactly the same stats, but it would attack everything willy-nilly and would also be kind of the enemy of any creature that lives within the forest, because it's just out to kill them. And maybe it would be quite chaotic, infected with a bit of a demonic influence, and just be seeking to destroy life entirely. So Treants, although in Tolkien's legend, the Treants believe they have wives, and I guess that would imply some sort of, well, relationships between them. There's no real legacy of that in Dungeons and Dragons, so Treants essentially just are created from trees, and wherever there are trees, there are potentially Treants. So yeah, they're great protectors of the environment. They can come in all shapes and sizes. Their personalities are whatever you need them to be, and you can have great conversations with plants because they have such a different perspective on things, and they are storehouses of excellent campaign information. And as I mentioned before, they can unveil new plots for you in the form of crypts and things like that they unveil for the adventurers. They could know the location of potent magic items if you take the time to sit and have a conversation with them and convince them that what you're doing is in the benefit of mainly the forest, or preserving the order, or at least stopping despoilers from propagating and potentially becoming a threat to the Treants, because they have a long-term perspective, and anybody who's working generally in their good is going to get their resistance. They have a very intimate relationship with elves, as I've mentioned, because elves live in forests, and you could quite often find that elves will know of Ents, protect the Ents as much as the Ents would protect their woodland home. So anybody who's having dealings with the Treants is probably going to have dealings with the elves as well, because they are so intimately connected. So next up, I guess, in woodland lore, I would like to cover something like dryads. If you think that interests you, let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, in the next video, I'll be continuing on with the series on the Nine Hells. Thanks for listening, everybody, and thanks, Dave, for your excellent suggestion.